Welcome, and thanks to the Foundation for providing this opportunity to present, and thank you for joining our recorded presentation. We are excited to share new information with you on behalf of Rhythm virtually today and in the future at live meetings. My name is Brianna Buckley, and I lead our medical teams. And today I'm joined by Karen Dressel on our patient engagement team, who will be a co-presenter during our meeting today. This is our agenda that we'll be walking through in the presentation. So I'm delighted to share a little bit about Rhythm Pharmaceuticals. We will discuss understanding early onset obesity and hyperphagia. Then we'll go into an overview on Imcivree, also known as setmelanotide. And finally, we'll have an introduction to Rhythm in Tune. So starting us off, who is Rhythm? Well, a little bit about Rhythm is that we are a global pharmaceutical company. And we are headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, and we've been around for a while. We've been established since 2008, and we've been growing. Now we have over 140 employees in our company. Our mission at Rhythm is dedicated to transforming the care of people living with rare genetic diseases of obesity, such as Bardet-Biedl syndrome. And what you'll see here on this slide are photos of individuals and families that we have worked with before. I'm going to share a little bit more about our focus and the obesity caused by Bardet-Biedl syndrome is different from general obesity. Our focus here is on what is known as the MC4R pathway. MC4R stands for melanocortin-4 receptor pathway. And this pathway is responsible for regulating appetite and weight. In people living with BBS, changes in some of the BBS genes can stop the MC4R pathway from working properly. When the pathway is not functioning, the signals that turn hunger off don't work correctly in the brain, leading to an intense, hard to control hunger, also known as hyperphagia and obesity. We're going to talk more about the MC4R pathway and hunger in just a bit. Let's go ahead and talk more about that intense, hard to control hunger. One of the things about this hunger or hyperphagia is that not everyone experiences the same hunger. And what you see on this slide are various symptoms that can be present. For some individuals, these symptoms are constant, and for others, they may only occur time to time. Some patients may experience intense hunger that never goes away. Others may take longer to feel full after eating. Another symptom could be feeling hungry again right after a meal. So for example, an individual may finish their breakfast and then immediately be thinking about lunch and what's for lunch or a snack that follows breakfast. Similarly, some patients experience thinking about food constantly. This can happen during the course of the day when individuals might be at school or work, and instead of thinking about their tasks or their schoolwork, they're focused on their food and when is their next meal and what they're going to eat. Some patients become upset when food is unavailable, and others may have food-seeking behaviors, such as sneaking or stealing food. Sometimes we hear about individuals that may seek out food at night or sneak food at night, and then their parents or caregivers may find that there are wrappers in the bedroom hidden away the next morning because they've been sneaking some food. But each one of these may be individual and unique to patients or individuals living with Bardet-Biedl syndrome. Why should we think about this hunger? And why is it important to manage this hunger and obesity in BBS? And left uncontrolled, it can contribute to obesity. And unmanaged over time, longer-term obesity can lead to serious health problems such as diabetes, high blood pressure, heart-related issues, or orthopedic issues, problems with bones and muscle. I want to share with you that you can always find out more information on BBS at leadforrareobesity.com. This is a resource that was created and sponsored by Rhythm to provide a resource to listen, empower, advocate, and drive for change for people who are affected by rare genetic diseases of obesity, including BBS. And you can see here that on this website, there is additional BBS information, educational resources, and videos sharing information from people living with BBS. You can access it at leadforrareobesity.com. Now I'm going to tell you more about Imcivree. As I mentioned, Imcivree is also sometimes called setmelanotide. Setmelanotide is the name of the drug that we use during clinical trials. And now that it's been approved for use, we use the name Imcivree as a brand name to represent the product. I wanted to share with you a little about this visual representation on the slide. And this was developed as a result of individuals in the community providing their feedback about living with Bardet-Biedl syndrome. And what was communicated is that managing feelings of hunger and dealing with weight management can be challenging. And that with the hope of new therapies, there's an opportunity to discover a world beyond obesity. Now we talk a little bit about Imcivree as the first and only FDA-approved treatment to target the impaired MC4R pathway, which we've talked about is a root cause of hunger and obesity in people living with Bardet-Biedl syndrome. Specifically, for the rest of the presentation, we're going to talk more about this pathway that controls hunger. We're going to look at the impact Imcivree has had on reducing measures of weight and hunger in our clinical trials in patients living with BBS. We're going to talk about how Imcivree was studied, the side effects, and how it was given. And then Karen's going to share even more about Rhythm in Tune, which is a support program dedicated to providing personalized resources, education, and information tailored to fit your needs. So let's start off with talking about what is Imcivree. Imcivree is a prescription medication that can be used in adults and children 6 years of age and older with obesity due to Bardet-Biedl syndrome to help them lose weight and keep it off. Imcivree is not for everybody, and it is not to be used in people with some conditions where it may not work. So those conditions are not related to BBS or other FDA-approved uses, including other genetic conditions or general obesity. It is not known if Imcivree is safe and effective in children under 6 years of age. Now, with all medications, there are risks and there are benefits. And the next few slides that I will share with you include information that has been collected on the experiences that were seen across all of our clinical trials. I'm sharing this information with you so that you can better understand the potential risks and benefits, and so that you can talk to your doctor if you have any questions or concerns about the safety information. So, before you use Imcivree, you can tell your health provider about all your medical conditions. Specifically, if you have had any darkening of skin, and sometimes we refer to this as hyperpigmentation. If you have had any depression or suicidal thoughts or behaviors, if you have kidney problems, if you are pregnant or planning to become pregnant, or if you are breastfeeding or plan to breastfeed. You should also tell your provider about all the medicines you take, including prescription and over-the-counter medications. So what are the possible side effects of Imcivree? Imcivree may cause side effects that might include male and female sexual function problems. In males, Imcivree may cause an erection without any sexual activity and unwanted sexual reactions in females. May cause depression and suicidal thoughts or actions. And if you experience any worsening symptoms while on Imcivree, you should inform your healthcare provider. And then it may cause increased skin pigmentation or darkening of skin lesions, which could be moles or nevi, birthmarks that you may already have. These changes happen because of how Imcivree works in your body, and particularly the darkening of skin will go away when you stop using Imcivree. Because Imcivree contains benzyl alcohol, there is a warning for benzyl alcohol toxicity in young, low birth weight infants, so it should not be used in premature and low birth weight infants. The most common side effects of Imcivree include darkening of the skin, injection site reactions, nausea, headache, diarrhea, stomach pain, vomiting, depression, and an erection that happens without any sexual activity in males. Okay, so next we're going to talk about specifically the hunger and obesity in BBS. Let's begin with an area of the brain that is called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is a key area of the brain that communicates being hungry or satisfied. In people living with BBS, the signals that turn hunger off don't work correctly in the brain. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, and we're going to think about the hypothalamus as a neighborhood within the brain. And in this neighborhood, there is a busy road. So the road allows trucks to travel to and from the brain. One road is called the melanocortin-4 receptor, or the MC4R pathway. The trucks on this road deliver the messages. They take the messages back and forth between the body and the brain. These messages are what control hunger. And finally, on this road, there is a traffic light. This traffic light represents the BBS gene, and this gene helps guide the trucks to deliver their messages. So in our neighborhood, on this busy street, this is what happens when the BBS gene does not have a variant or a change, and that the traffic light is working correctly. So what you can see here is everything is moving smoothly, and that our trucks are able to deliver the messages of not hungry on our pathway. And this pathway is the connection between our body and the brain, and being able to perceive that we're not hungry and that we are satisfied and don't need any more food. Now, in people living with BBS, the traffic light is broken due to a variant or a change in the BBS gene. So when our traffic light is broken, we have a traffic jam, and the trucks can no longer travel smoothly along the road or the pathway. And so the messages moving from the brain to the body to tell us that we're satisfied and we don't need food are no longer working. So because these signals are not making it across the pathway, the body believes that it is still hungry and we need more food. So let's look at what this road happens with Imcivree. So the Imcivree injection is designed to reestablish a functioning road. So it helps restore our pathway so trucks can deliver the messages to the brain that we're satisfied, that we're no longer hungry, and that we don't need to have food. So in this picture, we can think of Imsivery as a traffic officer. So the traffic light is broken, and the officer steps in to direct the trucks along the road, allowing them to take their messages from the brain to the body that it is satisfied and it doesn't need any more food. This is how Imcivree works to help the pathway work properly. Now that we know how Imcivree works, let's take a look at how it was studied. Imcivree has been studied both in adults and children in a year-long clinical trial. This was the largest clinical trial to date to study weight and hunger in both adults and children living with BBS. The clinical trial included 31 people who were evaluated, and all were ages 6 and older with obesity and a clinical diagnosis of BBS. Adults and children included in the clinical trial had to be of a certain weight or body mass index. We refer to body mass index as BMI. And BMI is a measure of body fat based on height and weight. Adults had to have a BMI of 30 or more, and children had to have a weight in the 97th percentile or higher. Based on the study, blood pressure, lipids, and waist size improved with Imcivree. And also we saw that BMI was reduced over the 1-year clinical trial, with all patients having an average reduction in BMI of approximately 8%. So how did Imcivree help with the reduction of weight measures in people living with BBS? Let's first look more about the results in children in the clinical trial. And in children growing who were ages 6 to 17 years of age, Imcivree was able to slow the rate of weight gain. In children, we use a score called the Bmi Z Score. This may not be as familiar to many of us, as we commonly use the BMI score, and we talk about that a lot in managing weight. The Bmi Z score is commonly used in children because they are still growing, and it takes into account a child's height, age, and gender. This is a tool that is very commonly used in clinical trials in children. Generally, we think of a meaningful reduction of greater than a 0.2 change in the BMI score. What we saw in the clinical study is that throughout the trial, 86% of children had a meaningful reduction in the Bmi Z score. Additionally, for patients that completed the clinical trial, they could enroll in a separate long-term study. And in this longer-term study, in children who continued taking Imcivree long-term, they maintained the reductions in the Bmi Z score. There were 19 patients, which included 12 children, that continued on in this long-term study. And we measured the weight changes after 2 years. And so what you see here is that 100% of children who took Imcivree maintained reductions in Bmi Z scores. And overall, after 2 years of therapy, there was a 0.72 reduction in Bmi Z score. Let's look at this another way in thinking about children living with BBS. And so what you see on this slide is a growth chart, and it's very common for children to track their weight and height along a growth chart. This chart in particular represents a 12-year-old female with BBS. And if you look at the black dots, this plots where the patient is in terms of their height and weight and BMI on this growth chart. And the green dots represent when this patient started taking Imcivree. So you can see that the last black dot was prior to starting Imcivree, and the patient was at 145% of the 95th percentile. What you see in the green dots is with starting Imcivree that the patient experienced a 17 percentage point reduction after 1 year of therapy. So this patient would then be at the 127th percentile of the 95th percentile. So this is just another way to think about how we're tracking weight on growth charts and what could potentially be the impact in treatment with setmelanotide. This is just another visual representation, an example that has been provided. It is not actually based on an actual patient and is for illustrative purposes only. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the adults throughout the clinical trial. And this, when we talk about adults, it's patients who are aged 18 years of age and older, living with BBS, and these patients experienced early, significant, and continued weight reduction with Imcivree. So we see at 14 weeks, so early in the clinical study, we saw the adults with about a 4% reduction in their body weight. Now, this is about 11 pounds lost on average. At the end of the trial, which was after a year, the adults had around 10% body weight loss, and this is about an average of 21 pounds. It's also interesting to note that in the clinical trial, people were not required to change their diet or exercise routine. Just like in the children, the adults had the opportunity to continue into a new trial looking at the long-term effects of Imcivree over 2 years. And after 2 years, there was even more weight loss in the adult population. So their average reduction after 2 years was 15%. So Imcivree reduced the weight early, as we saw at 14 weeks, continuously at the end of the 1-year study, and then over the course of 2 years on treatment. How did Imcivree help with hunger reduction in the trial? So we've talked a bit about hunger in the MC4R pathway, and we know that there are important signals there. So we have evaluated hunger in our clinical trials. And on this slide, you can see the scale that we use to measure hunger. On the one side, we have a score of 0, which represents not being hungry at all. And then on the other side, we have a score of 10, and this represents being the hungriest possible. And in our clinical trial, this score was completed every day for a year, and we were able to measure the changes in hunger. What we found is that Imcivree reduced the most severe feelings of hunger, and a majority of patients experienced a reduction of hunger within 2 weeks of taking Imcivree. So let's look at this graph a little bit more, and I will tell you what it's looking at. So the green line represents people who were taking Imcivree all throughout the study. So they started from the very beginning, taking Imcivree all the way through the end of the trial. And you can see that with the green line, that over the first 14 weeks, which is represented by the dashed line here, so at 14 weeks, there was a decrease in the hunger in patients taking Imcivree. You can see that change from the green line. And then after 14 weeks, they continued to have that reduction. Now the other line, this turquoise line that is dotted, these patients were not taking Imcivree in the beginning. They started taking Imcivree at 14 weeks. And so what you can see here is after the 14 weeks, when these patients were switched to Imcivree, the blue line becomes solid, and that you can see that they started seeing a change and experienced less hunger. And they began to be very similar to the group that was taking Imcivree since the beginning of the study. What this graph shows is how Imcivree provides a reduction in hunger early and continuously with treatment. Finally, let's talk a little bit more about the possible side effects with Imcivree. So overall, Imcivree has been studied across multiple clinical trials, and most side effects that we've seen with Imcivree are generally mild and have improved over time. We have collected information on Imcivree in over 10 years of clinical trials. And here on this slide, what you see are the most common side effects in people with obesity and a clinical diagnosis of BBS. As we talked about before, the most common side effect that we see is the darkening of the skin, also called hyperpigmentation. We also see injection site reactions and nausea. Now, most nausea and vomiting that we saw in the clinical trial were mild. None of these episodes were severe. The nausea and vomiting were primarily reported within the first month of treatment when patients were starting out. And then the nausea and vomiting episodes sharply declined. These symptoms typically only lasted a few days. There were no serious side effects reported related to Imcivree in the BBS trial. Let's take a deeper look at the skin darkening or hyperpigmentation. As I mentioned, this was one of the most common side effects, but it rarely led to people wanting to stop their treatment. As you can see in the first photo, there's a patient before they began taking Imcivree. The next photo is during their treatment, and the last is after they stopped taking Imcivree. This is a visual representation of how general darkening of the skin occurs and how it goes away when treatment is stopped. This happens because Imcivree can activate receptors in the brain that control melanin production, which is what gives our skin color. Let's review a little bit on how Imcivree is given. Imcivree is a once daily injection given under the skin. It is recommended to give Imcivree in the morning, and this can be done in the comfort of your home, and it can be given with or without food. Because Imcivree is just injected right beneath the skin, the needle that is used is very short and thin. This image is a representation of how small the needle is, and this ruler is not to scale. This shows that the needle that would be used for the injection is about 1/2 inch long. Now with that, I'm going to wrap up, and here is a summary of what we have talked about. Imcivree is the only treatment to address a root cause of hunger and obesity in the MC4R pathway. Imcivree showed reductions in weight measures and hunger scores. And finally, Imsivery was well studied and the side effects were generally mild and improved over time. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Karen, who's going to share more about rhythm in tune.
I am Karen, and I am part of our patient support team here at Rhythm. I now want to share with you all a little more about our patient support program that we have here at Rhythm. We're really excited to announce that we've now launched our Rhythm in Tune patient support program. This is an educational program that can provide support to caregivers and individuals living with rare genetic diseases of obesity. Next slide. Your patient education manager, such as myself, is your single point of contact here at Rhythm in Tune. We're here to support you whenever you need us. Our program is personalized, so it's tailored to fit your unique needs at every step. Some examples of things that we can assist with are included here on the slide, but include providing access to educational resources to support you in areas that you request, helping you understand your insurance coverage, providing opportunities to learn from others living with BBS, and of course, assisting you with getting started on a rhythm treatment if you decide to. Next slide. If you and your doctor do decide to treatment is right for you, we're here to assist by confirming and understanding your insurance benefits, sharing and confirming information on the insurance approval process, really being there for not only you, but also for your healthcare provider throughout the process. And of course, providing information about financial assistance for eligible patients. Next slide. Your patient education manager supports you throughout the insurance approval process. Once approved, your patient education manager will assist with coordinating the delivery of your medication and supplies. We really work as the liaison to our specialty pharmacy partner, Panther, for you. We provide initial injection walkthrough and support with your injections. We provide education on what to expect once you start on treatment, and provide support and assistance with any challenges that might come up along the way. Next slide. As you see on this slide, we currently have 3 members on our patient support team. Amy Meach, who covers the Midwest and the Rockies, Juliet O'Connor, who covers the Northeast and the Northwest, and I'm Karen Dressel, and I cover the South and Southern California. We each have over 20 years experience working with patients with rare diseases, providing education and support. If you're interested in learning more about our patient support program, or if you have any questions, please do reach out to us. You can reach us at this email address, which is patientsupport@rhythmtx.com or 855-206-0815. Once enrolled, you will have our direct cell number, so you're able to reach out to us or text us anytime that you have questions or need any support. I just want to say thank you so much to the BBS Foundation for giving us the opportunity to present today. And thank you to all of you. And I really look forward to hopefully speaking to you soon.